Hey guys, remember to subscribe!
Chapter 1. The First Purchase. Gwen. The shop buzzed with chatter and laughter. On the shelves everywhere were small plastic cages, rows of miniature people behind glass and bars, neatly arranged with price tags as if they were shoes or mobile phones. Most of the customers looked like her, teenagers standing in clusters, pointing, discussing models and brands. Who had the coolest one? Who dared buy one that looked wild? Gwen held her bag close to her side. She tried to look confident. It wasn't that she was scared. Everyone had one after all. School practically required it. They used them for projects, for fun during breaks, to take home and show friends. Gwen had seen the others. Some decorated them, others bragged about what they made them do. She walked slowly down the aisle. Each cell held a tiny human. Some stared blankly ahead, others had eyes full of pleading or pride. Gwen stopped at a cage with a young man labelled Martin, 18 years. He sat still, back straight, eyes lowered. There was something calm about him, but also something compressed, as if he were always waiting for the next thing to happen. The clerk came over at once. "That's a good choice," she said with a smile. "Martin is very well trained. He does everything he's asked. Many others your age already have one like him. Is this your first time?" Gwen nodded. She didn't want to seem uncertain, but she felt her stomach tighten. "Yes, I need one for school and at home." The clerk opened the cage, lifted Martin out, and placed him in Gwen's palm. He stood straight, but she could feel him trembling slightly. His voice was low, precise, and polite. "My name is Martin. I am ready to do whatever you wish, Miss Gwen." Everyone around them looked at her, gauging her reaction. Would she laugh, boast, put him down? She lifted him closer, studying his tiny face. He avoided her gaze, but the fear was there. Fear that went deeper than the shop, deeper than the system. Something learned, not innate. Gwen smiled faintly. "You're coming home with me, and to school." She tried to make it sound like the most natural thing in the world. The clerk gave her instructions on care and rules, how to speak to him, what he could be used for, and what one should not do. "If you want him to last." Other customers laughed. One called out, "Make him sing for you on the way home!" Gwen ignored them. She placed Martin in the special carrier the clerk handed her, a kind of luxury box with a soft lining, but still with bars. Martin automatically settled into the correct position, not too slack, not too defiant. Gwen left the shop, feeling the eyes on her back, the small prickle of pride and something that wasn't quite joy. She had one now. She belonged. But something in her gaze was still searching for answers she couldn't yet put into words. Martin. The smell of plastic and cleaning solution was so familiar that Martin barely noticed it. He sat in the cage, straightened his clothes, kept his head low. Everything was routine. Wait, obey, don't make eye contact. That was how you got chosen. That was how you didn't get sent back. Then she came. She looked different from most. Not cold, not smug, curious, maybe uncertain. He knew how to behave. Sit up straight, be polite, show no sign of fear, only respect. Still, he trembled when he stood in her hand, so close to her face. A teenager, yet still a universe above him. Every nerve in his body screamed, "Be perfect, do everything right. Otherwise..." The words stuck in his throat, but he said them as he had been trained. "My name is Martin. I am ready to do whatever you wish, Miss Gwen." When he was placed in the carrier, he slipped straight into the familiar position. Back against the wall, hands visibly folded, eyes down, never up. He waited as the world outside moved on, huge sounds and footsteps that shook his entire reality. Inside the carrier, he was not alone. He was with his fear, with the memories of what happens when you are not perfect. But now he was hers, and he would do anything not to fail again. Chapter 2. On the table. Martin. The light in the kitchen was harsh. When Gwen set the carrier down and opened the lid, Martin held his breath. Routine took over. He stood up, folded his hands, and waited for the command he knew would come. Her hand approached, large and warm, but not rough. She lifted him and placed him in the middle of the dining table. He looked up without raising his head too much. His gaze flickered between her eyes, her hands, and everything unknown. All the stories he had heard, those who had been crushed under massive heels, those who had been tested by teenage girls who wanted to see how much they could endure, those who had simply disappeared. His body was rigid with fear. He felt every tiny movement in her face, in her hands. Every muscle prepared itself to obey. Gwen sat down in front of him. She rested her cheek in her hand and watched him in silence. Not smug, not threatening, just present, as if she were looking straight through him. "You don't have to stand so stiffly," she said at last. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "You can relax. I promise I won't hurt you." Martin hesitated. Hesitation was dangerous. So he bowed his head a little deeper and answered precisely. "I will do whatever you wish, Miss Gwen. I am here to make you happy." There was a crooked smile at the corner of her mouth, not cruel, just a little sad, as if she had heard that 100 times before. "Yes, I know that's what you've been taught," she said. "But I mean it. You don't have to play a game for my sake." Martin didn't understand. Was this a test? Many girls tested their small ones, tempted them into breaking rules just to punish them afterward. He remained completely still. Gwen placed both arms on the table so her hands formed a protective arc around him, without touching him. "You know, I actually had some like you when I was younger, but I passed them on to a friend. She took better care of them than I could." She gave a short laugh. "That was Sophie. She was very careful. She always was." Martin nodded slowly. "You have done this before?" "Yes," Gwen replied. "But this time I want to do it differently. I don't want you to be afraid of me." She leaned forward, her green eyes kind but serious. "You're here because... well, that's how the world is now. But I'm not like the others." Martin swallowed. That's what many say," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Gwen noticed. It showed in her eyes as she tilted her head slightly. "I understand why you think I'll trick you. You've probably met many who promise things and then..." She hesitated, took a breath, as if searching for the right words. "But I promise you one thing. If you need a break, or if something feels wrong, you can say it. I won't get angry." Martin didn't answer. Fear sat like a lid over his heart. Everything in him warned that it was too dangerous to trust her, that if he relaxed, it could be the end. Gwen saw it all in his eyes. "You don't have to be perfect," she said quietly. "You just have to be Martin. I'll figure out the rest." She stood up and began setting the table for herself, but her movements were calm. She didn't slam anything. Her steps were quiet, even though the whole room swayed for Martin. She placed a small piece of bread and a shot glass of water in front of him. "You're welcome to eat if you're hungry. I'm going to do homework afterward anyway." Martin looked down at the bread, then up at her, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a small doubt toward his own fear. Maybe this girl was not like the others. Chapter 3. The first meal. Martin. The table was enormous, but Gwen had sat close to him so he wouldn't have to shout or feel lost on the endless wooden surface. At his place stood a small piece of plate, cut from a plastic tray, and a glass the size of a shot glass, her way of showing that he hadn't been forgotten in the scale of things. The food smelled wonderful. Real, warm dishes. Not the standardized shrink food he was used to, but stew, bread, cheese. Gwen placed a small piece of cheese and a bit of potato on his plate. She smiled carefully. "Just eat whatever you feel like. You don't have to finish everything," she said quietly as she filled her own plate. Martin nodded and sat down, not on command, but because he could feel the hunger gnawing. His hands trembled slightly as he took the first bite. He had never tasted anything so good. Each mouthful filled him with warmth and flavour, and for a moment it was as if he forgot his role. Then the thoughts came. He was just a toy, a tool, not a child at dinner. What if he became too greedy? What if Gwen got angry because he ate too much or the wrong way? His gaze went distant. He quickly rubbed a hand over his eyes, but a small tear slipped free. He turned his head away, but Gwen saw it. She gently set her fork down and leaned closer, so her face filled the space. Large and soft. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked softly. Martin shook his head quickly. "Sorry, He couldn't get the words out. "I didn't mean to, I wouldn't. It's just..." Gwen reached her hand out, not close to him, but so he could see she didn't intend to touch him. "You don't have to apologise. I understand that it's a lot, and I don't think it's weak to feel something. I would probably have cried a long time ago if I were you." Martin looked up, carefully, almost disbelieving. "Thank you," he whispered. "It's just... I've never been allowed to eat with anyone before. It feels wrong, but in a good way." Gwen smiled. "It's not wrong. Not here." She gave him a little more bread. "I think this is how it's supposed to be." They continued eating, now in a calmer mood. Martin felt his body begin to relax, his muscles slowly letting the fear seep away. For the first time in a long while, he felt almost normal. Then the door opened. Gwen looked up and smiled broadly. "It's just my mum." Her mother stepped into the kitchen, a woman with kind eyes, strong hands, and a gaze that took in everything in the room at once. She paused when she saw Martin on the table, but her smile was genuine. "Well, who do we have here?" she asked gently, and sat down across from Gwen so she, too, was at eye level with Martin. "This is Martin. He lives here now. We're just eating together," Gwen said. Her mother's eyes softened. She noticed the small plate, the tiny glass, and sent Gwen a proud look. "How lovely. Martin, just make yourself at home. If you need anything, just say so, all right?" Martin fell quiet. He looked first at Gwen, then at her mother. For the first time, there wasn't a hint of threat in the air. Only warmth. "Thank you, Mrs. Tennyson," he said softly, his voice nearly breaking. Her smile widened. "You can just call me Ellen. Here we're all just... ourselves." She sat down and began talking about her day. Small stories, as if it were completely natural that Martin was included. The atmosphere was light. Gwen laughed now and then, and Martin felt that it wasn't dangerous to breathe a little more freely. For the first time in his life, as the scent of food and the sound of laughter filled the room, he felt a trace of what he had always believed was impossible. Home. Chapter 4. Thoughts at Dusk. Martin sat calmly on Gwen's desk, where she had laid out a small piece of fabric as a blanket for him. The room was bathed in dim light, and outside the sounds of the house slowly quieted. Gwen sat in her large armchair, dressed in loose, cosy clothes, her feet tucked up beneath her hair falling in soft strands in front of her eyes. A gentle melody played from the speakers, settling over the room like a warm cloud. She leaned over her homework, and Martin watched her with curiosity. She wrote quickly, checked books and papers, solved problems as if it were the easiest thing in the world. But what she was doing wasn't easy, not for anyone her age, Martin thought. The assignments were full of unfamiliar terms, mathematics, complex connections. He felt a new kind of admiration for her. She is smart, he thought, not just kind, but capable. After a while, Gwen leaned back, took the headphones from her ears, and looked at him with a warm smile. "Are you tired?" she asked. Martin shook his head. There was still something he didn't understand, something he had to ask. "Gwen, why are you so kind to me?" he asked softly. "Most people don't look at me like that. And why? Did you give the others away?" Gwen grew quiet for a moment. She looked out across the room, as if reliving something that felt both far away and very close. "When I was little," she began, "I had small people too. All children do. But I was only 7. I couldn't control my strength back then, and I was afraid of hurting them without meaning to." She smiled a little sadly. "I truly loved them, but I knew I wasn't ready to take care of them, so I gave them to my friend Sophie. She was careful, gentler than I could be." Martin listened, his attention caught by something he had never heard before. Gwen continued, more serious now. "Since then, I've never seen you as toys. I see you, and the others, as us, just smaller. I don't think you can own a human being. It feels wrong, even if everyone says it's normal." She looked directly at him, and in her eyes there was neither superiority nor distance, only compassion and a quiet sense of conviction. "The world out there is dangerous. I can't change everything, but I can make it better for you while you're here. I wish we could just live together, as equals. Maybe one day, if enough of us want that." Martin fell silent. His fear began to crumble as she spoke. He no longer saw her as just his owner, but as something far more. A protector, maybe even a friend. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I hope there comes a day when you're right." Gwen smiled, leaned forward slightly, and turned on a small lamp, softening the light even more. "I hope so too. But until then, I promise I'll take care of you." The music continued to play, night settled in, and for the first time Gwen's room felt like a place where there was room for more than just fear and duty. Here, there were the first stirrings of something that resembled hope. Chapter 5. A Safe Night. Darkness slowly settled over the house. After a while, when the silence was filled only by soft music and muted voices, Gwen began tidying up her room. She put her books away, turned off the music, and folded her cosy blanket. Martin watched it all from his place on the desk. He still struggled to understand it all. How it could feel so natural to be here. How he was suddenly no longer afraid all the time, but instead felt a strange calm growing with every passing hour. On a shelf stood a small, homemade bed, carefully assembled by Gwen and her friend Jenny Foxworth from school. Jenny was not like most others. She was funny, open, and, what really set her apart, she was rich. Her home was full of small people, and she loved telling stories about how one day she would help many more when she grew up. Every detail of the little bed had been thoughtfully made. A foam mattress, a sewn cover in shades of blue and green, a small blanket, and a miniature pillow that carried a faint scent of lavender. Gwen guided Martin toward the bed. "We made it together a few months ago. Jenny says she wants to build an entire house for small people when she can afford it, but I think this one is pretty cozy, for now. If you get cold, I can find you an extra blanket. Martin carefully climbed the ladder Gwen had glued to the edge of the bed. He sat down, tested the mattress, and pulled the blanket up around himself. "It's perfect," he said softly, feeling the bed shape itself to his small body. For the first time, it didn't feel like he was on display, but like someone had truly thought about his comfort. His heart beat fast with gratitude. Gwen smiled and sat down on the floor beside the shelf so her face was closer to his. "Jenny and I often talk about what it would be like if everyone were okay. She always says she wants to change everything when she grows up. I believe her. She's strong, and she's always been kind to the small people at her place." The door opened, and Gwen's mother stepped into the room, lit by the warm, gentle glow of the lamp. She looked around, let her gaze rest on the little bed and on Martin, who had already settled in. Then she looked at Gwen, and her expression softened with pride. "Well, is it about bedtime in here?" she asked, sitting down on the edge of Gwen's bed. She reached out and stroked Gwen's hair. "I'm really proud of you, Gwen. You're kind to him, and to everyone else. Not everyone thinks as much about the small ones as you do." Gwen blushed slightly and shrugged. "It just feels right, Mum. I don't like it when people are treated like things." Her mother smiled and looked over at Martin. "You're always welcome here too, Martin. If you need anything, just say so. Gwen and I will listen." Martin looked up, and it dawned on him that he actually believed her. The atmosphere was calm and warm. Gwen's mother wasn't a threat, but part of something safe. He felt warmth spread inside him, a feeling of being seen as a person. They talked a little about the day, small things that would happen tomorrow, and Gwen told her mother a bit about Jenny. "She always has so many ideas." Gwen laughed. "She's built whole little gardens for her tiny people at home. I think she wants to save the whole world." Her mother smiled. "It's good to have friends who dream big. Maybe the two of you can make a difference together when you're grown." Silence settled over the room. Gwen said goodnight to her mother, who left and turned off the light. Only a small night lamp cast a soft golden glow across the room. Gwen settled into her own bed. Martin lay in his little one, looking out over the large, unfamiliar room. He could hear Gwen's steady breathing, smell the lavender, and feel the quiet warmth in the air. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he fell asleep without fear of what the next day might bring. Instead, he felt a gentle joy, a calm he had never believed he would be allowed to feel. There was space for him here, space to sleep, to dream, maybe even to hope for something more. Chapter 6. Morning Routine and Truths. Morning seeps softly through the curtains, dusty gold and warm against Gwen's cheeks. Her phone alarm suddenly screeches, a shrill reminder that daydreaming has no place before school. Gwen turns it off, sighs tiredly, but immediately feels the quiet joy of another day. She stretches, lets her body crack, and rubs the sleep from her eyes. Martin is still lying safely in his little bed on the shelf. He turns and slowly sits up, rubbing his eyes, for the first time without the old fear. Gwen smiles and fetches a set of tiny, neatly sewn trousers and a shirt, the school uniform that Jenny and her mother had stitched together. "Here, Martin," she says warmly. "This is for you. I think you look cool in it." She places the clothes beside his bed. He thanks her, touches the fabric with careful hands, pulls it on, and feels how right it is. Not like a costume, but like clothes meant for a person. Gwen finds her own clothes, slips out of her nightwear, and gets dressed with the natural ease of a girl who knows she isn't being watched. "Come on," she says. She gently lifts Martin onto her hand and carries him to the bathroom, where steam still lingers in the air from her mother's earlier shower. Gwen washes her face, brushes her teeth, fixes her hair. She sets Martin on the counter and gives him a small, soft washcloth. "You can use this. I'll help if you want," she says gently. Martin washes himself as best he can, and Gwen helps with his hair and dries him carefully, as if he were made of porcelain, but she laughs as she dries behind his ears. "There. Now you look like someone who can take on the whole world." Martin smiles, an honest, sleepy smile. Downstairs, the air smells of toasted bread, coffee, and oatmeal. Gwen's mother, Ellen, is already there, her hair tied up, her work jacket pulled over her shoulders. "Good morning, sweetheart. Good morning, Martin," she says, her voice full of sunshine. She places a plate in front of Gwen and sets a small piece of buttered toast and some fruit out for Martin, something she now always remembers. Ellen bends down, kisses Gwen on the hair, and gently squeezes Martin's shoulder with a giant finger. "Good luck at school, and remember to take care of each other." She smiles and rushes out the door, bag over her shoulder. Breakfast is quick but cosy. Gwen eats, but keeps watching Martin as he nibbles the bread, chewing quietly and listening. "Are you nervous?" she asks. Martin thinks for a moment, then shakes his head slightly. "A little. I've been to school before, but never the way you do it. How is it?" Gwen explains the school routines. "There are lots of rules for small people. You always have to stay with me. The teachers keep an eye on things. They're actually good at protecting you. Many in my class are kind, but there are still some who play with their small people as if they're just toys. Make them dance, sing, wear flashy clothes, just to show them off." She looks at Martin, feeling anger stir. "I hate it. It's not fair. You have feelings, just like us. You're not here for entertainment." Martin looks up, his gaze calmer than before. "I know, Gwen, but you're bigger, stronger. That's just how it's always been. When I was trained, I saw some who were treated much worse. They never became themselves again." Gwen grips her spoon. "It shouldn't be like that. I don't even know how it started. Maybe it's always been this way." Martin sighs. "I don't know. I can't remember anything else." Gwen stares into the air. "I wish I knew if it could ever change." Suddenly she catches the clock in the corner of her eye. She freezes. "Oh no, we're going to be late." She jumps up, gathers the plates. She runs upstairs, grabs her bag and bends down to Martin. "Come here." She lifts him up, carefully opens the large breast pocket of her shirt and sets him inside. The pocket is padded, safe and dark. His own little den against the chaos of the world. "Hold on tight." Gwen laughs, half nervous, half excited. She sprints out the door, shoes slapping against the tiles. Sunlight hits their faces, wind filling her hair with the scent of morning grass and asphalt. Martin sways gently in her pocket, but he feels her warm hand just behind the fabric, a hidden reassurance that everything is as it should be. The bus is visible in the distance. The yellow door stands open, children gathering around. Gwen picks up her pace. For Martin, it feels like being carried through a world he no longer fears, but where, for the first time, he dares to hope for more than just survival. Chapter 7. The School Bus. The yellow rubber lip of the door opened with a sighing groan, and Gwen stepped inside, her bag swinging over her shoulder. She said a clear, cheerful "good morning" to the bus driver, who smiled and nodded, used to both big and small passengers. Gwen walked down the aisle of the bus while Martin, hidden but awake in her breast pocket, looked out. He lifted his head only discreetly above the edge of the pocket. It felt like sticking his head out of a window in a tall building, with the whole world buzzing out there. Everywhere there were children of all ages, and many of them had small people with them. Some girls wore them in their hair like decorations. Other boys let their small people sit on their shoulders or in special holders on their backpacks. Women and men, younger and older, he had never seen so many at once. Gwen stopped halfway down the bus. On a double seat sat Jenny, her friend, with a wide smile and eyes sparkling with energy. She was younger than Gwen, maybe 10 or 11, but had always had confidence and charm. Two small people were strapped to her pants with colourful little bands, one on each thigh. They looked happy, even waved to Gwen as she sat down. "Hi, Gwen," Jenny said with a laugh, and Gwen sat beside her. Martin immediately felt the sense of safety. Jenny's small people didn't look afraid at all. They wore tiny brooches, had cheerful faces and calm eyes, as if the bus ride was just an everyday thing. Jenny leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice when she noticed Martin in Gwen's pocket. "Hey," she said kindly. "How are you really doing, Martin? First time is kind of wild, right?" Martin glanced up, nervous but polite. "I'm a little nervous, yes. I've never been to school like this before." His voice trembled slightly, but Jenny's gaze was gentle. Jenny smiled broadly, and her small people nodded encouragingly. "That's totally normal. Mine were scared on the first day too, especially Daisy. She hid under my shirt and didn't dare say a word." Daisy, a tiny woman with light hair and a flower dress, waved and blushed slightly. Jenny continued, "There are always some who think small people are just there for fun. Mine were scared of running into some of those stupid kids too. But you know what? The mean kids got into trouble. The police actually came and took them away because they couldn't take proper care of their small people. Now I have Daisy and Max, and they know I'll always help them." Max, Jenny's other small one, gave a thumbs up and looked at Martin with a confident smile. "Jenny's the best. Don't worry, Martin. Gwen's with you. It'll be fine." Martin breathed a little easier. Gwen's hand gently pressed against the outside of the pocket, an invisible signal. "You're not alone." "Thank you," Martin said softly. "I just hope I can do it right." Gwen and Jenny exchanged a glance over his head, a look full of understanding. Jenny said, "Just be yourself. And if anyone's being stupid, just tell us. Gwen and I will help you." The bus rolled on, the engine vibrating through the floor. The chatter grew quieter, but it was filled with hope and new friendships. For the first time, Martin felt that he might find a place in this big world, where even the smallest could have a voice, if someone was willing to listen. Chapter 8. The First Day of School. The bus rolled slowly into the school parking lot, the engine humming softly as the children began getting ready to step off. Gwen glanced down at Martin, who still sat safely and discreetly in her breast pocket. He felt her hand gently brush across the pocket from the outside, a final reassurance that everything would be okay. Beside Gwen sat Jenny, who now lifted her two small people up and placed them securely on her shoulders. They smiled, waved, and looked excited. Jenny spoke softly to them, and they laughed together, like old friends heading into a new adventure. When the doors opened, a rush of voices spilled out into the morning sun. Gwen and Jenny stepped off, and Gwen instinctively held one hand over her breast pocket as she walked onto the pavement. Jenny carefully took her small people down and held their hands for a moment as they headed toward the entrance. In front of the door stood a small group of girls who had already hung up their jackets and scarves. They smiled at Gwen and Jenny, greeting them with bright voices. "Good morning," and briefly showed off their small people, who were strapped to colourful bracelets or sitting in tiny bags. Everyone was friendly, and the small ones waved cautiously back, some with curious looks, others more shy. Gwen smiled, nodded to the girls, and sat down at the table she had used since last year. She carefully took Martin out and placed him on the tabletop right in front of her. Martin looked around. Everything seemed huge and unfamiliar, but the girls' looks were neither cold nor smug, only warm and interested. Jenny sat down beside her and let her small people climb onto the table. They immediately began talking quietly with Martin, exchanging names and little stories from their old schools. The atmosphere was light, a gentle hum of new possibilities. Soon more girls came over to the table. They wanted to say hello, hear who Martin was, and show off their own small people. A girl with long dark hair reached out her hand so Martin could greet her. He hesitated, but Gwen nodded encouragingly, and he carefully took her finger. "He's cute," the girl said with a smile. "Mine is called Milo. Do you want to see his little book?" The conversation flowed back and forth, filled with laughter, short stories, and a touch of pride in taking care of the small ones. Then the door opened with a soft click, and the class teacher stepped in. Her gaze quickly swept across the room, checking that everyone was in place. Her smile was warm, her voice firm and reassuring. "Good morning, everyone. Take your seats and we'll get started." Gwen pushed her chair in, folded her hands on the desk, and sent Martin a calming smile. Jenny whispered something funny to her small people, and for the first time Martin felt the nervousness loosen its grip. He wasn't just a tool, but part of something larger. The school day began, and for now everything felt, just a little, as it should be. Chapter 9. The Assignment and the Confrontation. The lesson began with energy in the teacher's voice as the class teacher, young, smiling and eager, walked across the floor and wrote the day's heading on the board in blue chalk. Cooperation and trust, an assignment with your small friends. Today's task will be done together with your small people, she explained as the whole class buzzed with excitement. You're going to build a small bridge out of paper and drinking straws, and your small friends will help test how strong it is. Martin felt Gwen's hand slide a pair of scissors and some tape closer to him so he could reach out and help if he wanted. Gwen smiled. We're going to build the best one. All around them, girls and small people began working together, some offering playful suggestions, others having their small friends fold paper, measure with tiny rulers, laugh and cut. But in the middle of the hum, Martin and Gwen suddenly heard something else. A voice, low but sharp, somewhere behind them. There was tension in it. Gwen discreetly turned her head. By the window sat Lillian Hale with her 3 small people in front of her. Her eyes were dark, her expression set hard. "I told you to hold on, not drop it," she hissed. 2 small figures struggled with the paper, while the third knelt on the table, tears running down his face. "I'm trying, Miss Lillian. It's hard. I promise I'll do better. Please don't send me back." Lillian looked down at them, eyes narrowed. "If you're this bad, I should just trade you in and get some who know what they're doing. My big sister says you should never settle for something that's broken." The small one on his knees trembled. "No, don't send us away. We can do it, we promise." Lillian rolled her eyes, but behind the anger there was something else. A hesitation, a flicker of something she couldn't quite hide. She tried to be cool, like her sister, but her hands shook slightly, and her gaze slipped away from the small people for a moment, as if she were struggling to be as uncaring as she wanted to seem. Gwen saw it all. She felt anger bubbling up, but also compassion. She half rose from her chair, drew Martin a little behind her, and walked over to Lillian. "Hey, Lillian, is everything okay?" Gwen asked, her voice calm but firm. Lillian answered quickly, without meeting Gwen's eyes. "It's fine. They just have to learn to do it right. My sister says you can't show weakness." Gwen crouched down to be at eye level with Lillian and the small people. Her voice dropped so only those nearby could hear it. I don't think being kind to them is weakness. They're really trying, Lillian. Maybe they just need to know you believe in them, not that they should be afraid of you. Lillian looked away, lips pressed tight. She struggled, unwilling to lose face in front of Gwen or the others. You don't get it, Gwen. My sister says that's how you earn respect. Gwen smiled faintly, but her eyes were serious. You earn much more respect from them if they trust you, if they know you'll help them when they mess up. My small person makes mistakes too, but we try again. That's how we get better, together. For a brief second, Lillian looked down at her small people, and her facade cracked. Maybe, but they still have to do it right. Her voice was hoarse, uncertain. Just for a moment, she was simply a girl who wanted to do well enough for someone to look up to her. Gwen gently tapped Martin on the shoulder and said softly, "We can help if you need it." She looked at the small people. "It'll be okay. Don't worry." Martin looked at Gwen with wonder and admiration. The other small people looked up too, their fear eased for a moment, while Lillian fell silent, caught in her inner struggle between wanting to seem tough and feeling how much it hurt when her small people cried. The lesson continued, but now with a different energy. The assignment was slowly completed, not because anyone was threatened, but because someone understood that everyone needed to feel safe before they could build something that would hold. Chapter 10. The break that went wrong. The bell rang, slicing through the classroom like a release. Chairs scraped back, laughter burst out in small clusters, and the door slid open toward the light of the schoolyard. Breaktime carried that special energy where everything feels possible for 10 minutes. Gwen sat on the bench by the window with Jenny. They spoke quietly, shared a snack, laughed about something silly from the assignment. Martin stood on the bench beside Gwen's hand, while Jenny's small people climbed up onto the edge and talked with him. For the first time, he wasn't just nervous, he was included. "It's strange," Martin said softly to the other small ones. "I've never had a break before." "You get used to it," Daisy said gently. "Just remember to watch where you're going." A little distance away stood Lillian. She wasn't part of the conversation. She stood with her 3 small people gathered in front of her, shoulders tense, gaze hard. She had glanced toward Gwen and Jenny several times, seen how they laughed, how the small people around them seemed calm. Something inside her tightened. "You," she said sharply to the smallest of her 3, a young man with trembling hands. "Come here." He hesitated, then stepped forward. "Yes, Miss Lillian?" Her voice dropped, almost teasing, but there was anger beneath it. "Do you know what my sister does when her small ones don't listen?" She leaned down so her shadow covered him. "She swallows them. Just like that. For fun." The boy froze. The 2 other small ones stepped forward. "Lillian, stop," one of them whispered. "Not here." Lillian reached her hand out as if to grab him. She opened her mouth exaggeratedly, pretending to inhale. It wasn't a joke to them. The boy fell to his knees, his voice breaking. "Please, I promise I'll do better." A gasp rippled through the schoolyard. Several girls turned around. Someone shouted, "Gwen!" Gwen was on her feet before she thought. She ran, heart pounding, and pushed herself between Lillian and the kneeling small man. She crouched down, placed her hand flat in front of him like a shield. "Stop!" Gwen said loudly. "What are you doing?" Lillian stepped back half a pace, but her face hardened. "They're mine," she said coldly. "I can do what I want." "No," Gwen replied, her voice shaking with anger. "You can't. That isn't play." Lillian snorted, but her hands trembled. "You think you're better because you play nice?" She took another step forward. That's not how the world works. They stood close. Too close. Some girls screamed. Jenny came running, pulled her small people away and shouted for a teacher. Then it happened. In her anger, Lillian swept her hand out to the side. Not hard, not on purpose, but fast. One of her small people was hit, knocked over and landed wrong. A small, sharp scream cut through the air. No! Lillian froze. She stared down. The small one lay on his side, clutching his leg, his face twisted in pain. The other two small ones rushed to him. His leg! One of them shouted. Lillian dropped to her knees. All the coolness vanished in an instant. No, no, no. I didn't mean to. She said his name again and again, her voice breaking. Look at me. I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The small one looked up at her, tears streaming. It hurts, he whispered. I know, Lillian said, now crying. It's my fault. I just wanted... She couldn't finish the sentence. The other two small ones placed their hands on her fingers, squeezing them. It's okay, one of them said, even with a trembling voice. You stopped. You're here. Lillian collapsed, sitting on the ground with shaking shoulders. She didn't look cool. She looked scared, devastated, like a child who had suddenly understood the consequences of what she had seen others do. Gwen stood a step away, breathless. The anger was still there, but it was smothered by something else. Confusion. Pity. She had seen Lillian as cruel, and now she saw her as a girl on the verge of breaking. Jenny came up beside her. The teacher's on the way, she whispered. Lillian lifted her head, eyes red. I'm sorry, she said, not just to the small one, but to all of them. I just wanted to be like her. Gwen said nothing. She didn't know what to say yet. The break was over. But something had changed, and none of them forgot what had happened. Chapter 11. Responsibility and Allies. The class teacher approached quickly, her expression restless and sharp as she tried to read the situation in front of her. She saw Gwen standing close to Lillian, who was kneeling on the asphalt with tears in her eyes, and her small people gathered tightly around her. And she immediately noticed that this was not the first time Lillian had caused trouble. There was tension in the air. Several children watched closely, a few whispering, as if they already knew that Lillian often drew unfortunate incidents to herself. The teacher knelt down so she was at eye level. Gwen, Lillian, what happened here? Lillian collapsed inward, afraid to meet the teacher's gaze. She could barely breathe, fear shining through her. She stared down at her small people, who sat pressed close to her knees. The teacher waited, patient but firm, for an answer. Gwen quickly glanced from Lillian to the teacher. She felt the familiar mix of responsibility and a sudden stab of concern for Lillian. Not to cover it up, but to give her a chance. It was my fault, Gwen said, her voice calm but resolute. I wanted to help, but I bumped into Lillian, and she stumbled, and then she ended up hitting her small person. It wasn't on purpose. I'm really sorry. Lillian stared up at Gwen in shock, eyes wide. No one had ever covered for her before. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again, nervously, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. A faint, barely audible thank you slipped from her. The teacher sighed, but her voice was gentle. I'm glad you said so, Gwen. Accidents happen. The important thing is that you tell the truth so we can help. She looked at the small person who still lay on the ground with his leg drawn up. We need to get him checked by the school nurse right away. Lillian, you'll come along shortly so we can talk. She carefully lifted the small one into a special box that Gwen had helped make earlier in the year. Jenny, would you walk Lillian over to the nurse in a moment? Jenny nodded and quickly gathered her own small people, The tension slowly dispersed, and little by little the children returned to their games. Gwen still stood there, somewhat confused, her gaze on Lillian, who sent her a shy, uncertain look. "Thank you," Lillian murmured, her voice small and trembling. For not making it worse." Gwen gave her a small nod, not knowing what to say. Lillian quietly followed the teacher and Jenny, her head bowed. But in the turmoil, Gwen forgot all about Martin, who was left standing alone on the bench among the other children. They quickly moved on with their own games and conversations, some jumping rope, others sitting in a circle, one girl beginning to read aloud to two small people on a patch of grass. Martin remained standing there, suddenly small and unprotected in the middle of the schoolyard. No one noticed that a new girl at the edge of the playground had been watching him for some time now, her gaze sharp and assessing. Her small person sat silently on her shoulder. Her intentions were hidden, but she clearly had plans. The sunlight suddenly felt cooler to Martin. He stood still and waited, unaware that something new, perhaps dangerous, perhaps important, was on its way.